Welcome to a new Bitcoin Books video. Today, we're jumping into a book with a title that, well, it definitely gets your attention. We're talking about Bitcoin, Hard Money You Can't F With by Jason A. Williams. And today, we're going to break down the core arguments he makes. So, let's dive right in. All right, let's kick things off with this quote right here from Michael Saylor, the CEO of MicroStrategy. He talks about sitting on a $500 million ice cube that's melting. And honestly, that image is at the very heart of what this book is all about. So what does he mean by a melting ice cube? Well, it's your money. It's the cash you have in the bank, the savings you've worked so hard for, and it is just silently losing its power every single day. And according to Williams, this isn't some mistake. It's not a bug. It's a feature of the system we're all living in. Okay, so how is this ice cube actually melting? What's causing this decay in our money? Well, the first part of the book really zeroes in on one big culprit. He calls it the money printer problem, and it gets right to the core of the issues he sees in our modern financial system. And look, this isn't some fringe idea or a conspiracy theory. This is a direct quote from the chairman of the Federal Reserve. He's saying it right out loud. And the book's argument is that this power, the ability to just create money out of thin air, it's not a good thing. It's the central flaw in the whole machine. It's what devalues everything and, Williams argues, makes the whole economy unstable. So this isn't just some abstract economic theory, right? This has a real, tangible impact on all of us. And the book puts a stark number on it. Think about this. For every single dollar you had back in 1991, you've lost 50 cents of its purchasing power today. It's just gone. Half of its value has effectively vanished into thin air. So how in the world did we get to this point? The book lays out a timeline of what it sees as the key breaking points. It all kicks off in 1971, the moment the US dollar was completely severed from gold. Fast forward to 2008, the global financial crisis, and that's when we first hear this new term, quantitative easing. The book basically calls this a fancy way of saying turning on the money printers. But then look at the very next date, January 2009. The first ever Bitcoin block is created, almost like a direct answer to the crisis. And then, of course, 2020 hits, and we get the announcement of QE Infinity to deal with the pandemic. Okay, so what are the actual real-world consequences of all this? Where does all that new money go? Well, it floods into assets, stocks, real estate, driving prices through the roof, while most people's paychecks are barely budging. The book also talks about something called the Cantillon effect, which is a super important concept. It basically means that people and institutions closest to the money printer, think big banks, big corporations, they get the new money first, when it's still worth the most. By the time it trickles down to everyone else, prices have already gone up. Williams argues this is exactly why the wealth gap keeps getting wider and why it can feel like the game is rigged. All right, so after painting let's be honest, a pretty bleak picture of the problem, the book completely pivots. It shifts gears to what it presents as the one and only real solution. And this solution isn't about new policies or promises from politicians. It's built on something entirely different: pure, unchangeable mathematics and code. And this slide really just lays it all out, side by side. On one end, you have the US dollar, an infinite supply, controlled by a small group of people at a central bank. But then you have Bitcoin. Its supply is hard-capped, 21 million, max, forever. And it's not issued by a person who can change their mind. It's issued by code that follows a predictable, transparent schedule. According to the book, this predictable, absolute scarcity, that's the whole game changer. And this all comes down to a really revolutionary idea called digital scarcity. I mean, think about it. Before Bitcoin came along, anything digital could just be copied and pasted over and over again. An email, a photo, a song file, there was no limit. Williams argues that Bitcoin was the first thing in history to solve this. It created a digital item that you can't just counterfeit or copy. You can't just make more of it. And that, right there, is the foundation of everything. So, building on top of that scarcity, the book breaks down the key properties that make Bitcoin hard money. First, it's decentralized. There's no CEO, no central office to shut down. Second, it's censorship resistant. Nobody can just decide to block your transaction because they don't like you. Third, it's unconfiscatable. If you control your own keys, you control your money, period. And finally, it's portable. You can send immense value anywhere on Earth almost instantly with just an internet connection. And hey, don't just take the author's word for it. This isn't just an idea for the early adopters and cypherpunks anymore. The book points to people like the legendary investor Paul Tudor Jones. When he says he wants to own the fastest horse, he's talking about a race against the money printer. He sees Bitcoin as the best bet to outrun that currency devaluation. For him, it's just a pragmatic choice, an escape hatch. And that actually brings us perfectly to the third big theme in the book. The argument here is that we're moving past the stage of just individual investors. We're now entering a completely new phase, what the book calls an institutional tsunami, a massive new wave of adoption that's just getting started. The way Williams sees it, Bitcoin's adoption has happened in these distinct 4-year cycles. First it was the cypherpunks and libertarians who saw it as peer-to-peer cash. Then came the Silicon Valley VCs who started calling it digital gold. After that, we had the big retail boom in 2017. But this current era, the book argues this one is different. This is when corporations started putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets as a hedge against inflation. And the book projects an even bigger wave to come, nation-states looking at it as a potential global reserve asset. And the book really pinpoints 2020 as the moment everything changed, when a publicly traded company, MicroStrategy, took hundreds of millions of its own cash, its treasury, and put it into Bitcoin. It was a massive signal. It sent a shockwave through boardrooms everywhere. Then Square followed suit, and suddenly a new game was on. The book argues it kicked off this game-theoretic race where no CEO wants to be the last one left holding that melting ice cube we talked about. Okay, so finally, the book looks ahead. It peers into the future and sees a major conflict brewing. It's a battle between two completely different visions for the future of digital money. You've got one path controlled by governments and another that is by its very nature free from any government's control. And this is what those two futures look like. On one side, you've got central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. The book paints these as essentially programmable money. Money that can be tracked, surveilled, and even turned off if the government doesn't like what you're doing. Censorship isn't a bug, it's a feature. But then you have the alternative, Bitcoin. It's permissionless, it's free, and censorship is impossible. And here's the interesting twist. Williams argues that the more governments push for CBDCs, the more people will actually run towards Bitcoin, looking for a way out. And all of this builds up to the book's final and maybe most provocative, big idea, the concept of hyper-Bitcoinization. So what is that? It's the theory that the world could, one day, voluntarily ditch the current fiat system and move on to a Bitcoin standard. So the ultimate question the book leaves you with is this. Is this the inevitable future of money, or is it just a financial fantasy? It's a massive question to think about. For those who want to learn more, the link to get the book is available in the video description. If you found this content interesting, please subscribe to the channel and like it to help us reach as many people as possible. Thank you.